Alright, hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to Discussing Tabletop for, what's today's date? The July 22nd, 2017. It's episode... Hello, welcome everybody, welcome... 38? 38, yes. Yeah, we've been going for quite a while here, continuing to go. Alright, so I hope everybody's having a great day. Today we've got an interesting set of topics. I do want to first talk about the changes to the Grand Prix and beyond for Magic. They've expanded it and changed a whole bunch of things related to it, so that's an interesting thing to discuss. Since we have two people that do booster drafts, or do draft as a format, I wanted to talk about draft as a format because it's a format I don't think we've discussed on the show, really, and I don't do a lot of it anyway. So
it's the best format. I
know, but I don't do a lot of tournament format anyway. Regardless.
Oh, gotcha.
Then I do want to talk about the Space 1889 RPG, which apparently has been out for a long time, but they've got some new stuff in the latest version of it. I did want to talk a little bit about the Coriolis RPG and their new stuff, and then I wanted to talk about the Quill and Shadow single-player RPG, which is definitely an interesting take on RPGs that you're doing it alone. Well, why don't we start, of course, with the sort of changes to Magic's tournament format. So, for 2018, they've had a big announcement that effectively they're expanding the number of tournaments, first off, because we saw that, like, it had originally been scheduled that it was like 2 years in between, like, Las Vegas, which we just had, and now it's going to be again next year. They're already scheduled another one. It also seems to be some legacy is being added in. Not a whole lot, but some of it. More modern. I mean, it's sort of like they're splitting, like, standard, limited, and modern have a very equal representation in the Grand Prix, they're sort of saying.
And the Pro Tours. The Pro Tours are bringing back Modern and Legacy to some extent in a way they haven't in a long time. With Legacy, at least. Modern had a Pro Tour a couple years ago, but it's going to be back at 2 Pro Tours this year, so that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It represents a pretty big policy change, too, because the reason that they got rid of the Modern Pro Tours was because they didn't want to have to, like, moderate the format at the level that they were. So the fact that they've shifted back to doing it is kind of a huge deal, and I kind of wonder what motivated them to do that. Apart from everybody's finding Standard awful and boring at sometimes.
That's probably it. That's a lot of the complaints about Standard, but what I'm curious to see is if bringing back Modern and this really interesting team trios format where one person on a team plays a Standard deck, one person plays a Modern deck, one person plays a Legacy deck. I'm curious to see if they do well enough, if that's going to become a normal thing, or if the introduction of these formats that we haven't seen in a while, or the reintroduction of them, is going to stick around after the 25th anniversary of the Pro Tour, which is sort of what they say they're celebrating, but I'm hopeful that if it does well enough, we'll actually see more formats than Standard and Limited at Pro Tours, because I don't play a lot of Constructed. I mostly play Limited, as you alluded to, but when I did play Constructed, Modern was my format, and so I have a harder time getting into Standard. So diversity's good, too. Playing the same exact format all 4 Pro Tours is kind of boring, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So I worked at a store called Lodestone Coffee and Games in Minnesota, and we started doing team tournaments around the time of, I think it was GP. There was a Team Unified Modern GP a few months ago. So, like, kind of building off the hype of that, we did a GP or a team tournament beforehand. And then they've been doing one, like, every month since. Like, it still hasn't lost its momentum, which we weren't sure what was going to happen with it. So it sounds like people still really enjoy it. And, like, they really enjoy being able to play with their friends who have weird Legacy decks. So that's always a bonus, like, at the GP level especially.
It's also interesting that they're putting more into the year, too. It's like, is this is it just for the 20th anniversary, or are they going to keep with like this more intense schedule of having more tournaments? That's like an interesting question too about this, because it definitely is an increased number overall throughout the year too. I mean,
yeah, there's a ton of I think they said there's 60 Grand Prix. That's insane. Like,
yeah,
that's an incredible number of Grand Prix. And Channel Fireball is running them all. I'm not entirely sure how they're capable of that.
Running, I think there's actually a matter of like an economy of scale going on here, where like if you handle all of the GPs, then you will be able to afford like moving everything and having people in different countries do things internationally. So like, whereas you had to ship everything everywhere before, now you can have a little bit more permanence, and I think that they're going to benefit from that.
Right. So you're saying they make more money off of having all of the tournaments, thus they're able to afford to do all of the tournaments. No.
Not even that so much as like there is security in knowing that if I'm going to do a GP in Japan, I'm going to do like 5 GPs in Japan, so I can establish a bit more of a permanent infrastructure there, rather than having to move everything back and forth from the West Coast every time I do a GP in Japan.
Which would cut their costs, I would assume, too, because if you have 5 GPs in Japan, it's going to be cheaper to keep the stuff there and be able to reuse it than to keep moving it back and forth once a year. That's going to be more of a cost instead of being able to keep it there for a certain amount of time.
It's also definitely interesting that I've heard this discussion before of it's now pretty much all Channel Fireball doing these events, which is like that weird argument of like, okay, well, they do their events their way, so you have to kind of live with it. But we do see they do the events well, and I think that's one of those things about it. And it's the same thing. It's like you can't really complain too much because it's, Wizards' product, and that's the only thing that's being put out here anyway. So
I think if there are issues, like, you can complain about it, but like, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it'll be Wizards that'll be like, well, I guess maybe we'll do something about it,
I do think it would be nice if, like, I like Channel Fireball and everybody involved with it, really, but I do think it would be nice if there were just, like, 10 GPs a year out of these 60 that other companies could do, just so they have that opportunity. I do think it's strange that all 60 Grand Prix are Channel Fireball. I mean, I think they'll do a great job. I just think, again, I like the idea that other companies have a shot at running Grand Prix, too.
Exactly. I do think that would... it would give a different feeling to some of them, and that might be a good thing. But again, it's hard to say, exactly where the balancing line between is it good or bad if they're, running all of these, because it is, again, it's a lot, and it's kind of almost an insane number of tournaments. It would be over one a week, and they probably don't. They might have weeks off. We're not sure. We don't have the full schedule for the year. So then what? You're like got like because there's sometimes now they have 2 or 3 a weekend. So yeah,
and it's usually 3 different companies. Like they're on 3 different continents usually when they're doing 3 in a weekend, and so it's usually 3 different companies. But now it'll all be Channel Fireball, which I do think will make coverage on the whole like a lot better. They just seem to have they do coverage better than a lot of the other Grand Prix have done when Channel Fireball has them, so that'll be nice for like watching the game on Twitch and stuff like that, so that's good.
Yeah, and it's a standardization too, which is not always a bad thing.
Right. Sometimes
it can be, but again, they do good events, so a standardization of it is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, yes, we don't get as many new ideas for it. So, going back to the return to formats, kind of, that we have this new definite balance. We have seen some kind of, like, I think it was the beginning of this year that Wizards was talking more about, like, focusing on standard or something, I think they were talking about. But the thing is, like, nothing they have done over the course of this year has told me they focus on standard. They have, like... said one thing and done completely different.
I think it's because the standard format ended up not being. We haven't had a good standard format to most people for a while now. There's been all these emergency bannings, and it's been crazy. So I think they're realizing that it's probably better to not have all your eggs in one basket, I guess. If one whole format is bad, having 4 Pro Tours in that format, they probably didn't get the best viewership at those formats, at those Pro Tours that they would if they'd done different formats.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that they have been doing, I've noticed, with focusing on standard is like a lot of their promotional, like organized play that they do is marketed towards beginning players, and all of that, like the open houses and the game days and stuff, that's all standard because that's what they want people to start playing to kind of like ease them into the complexity of Magic. I think one of the reasons that they had tried to do standard Pro Tours was that that's another like way to ease people into competitive play. Like, oh yeah, I'm watching these really good players play decks that I've recognized from F&M, and I think that they realized that that didn't have as much of an impact as they wanted. So like, they're not focusing on standard so much at the competitive level, but they certainly are at the like casual to entry level.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's also worth noting, to be a cynic and to be skeptical, that standard is what sells more booster packs too. I mean, then, modern, most of the cards were printed a long time ago, and so it's a secondary market where most people get them, and standard is where they make a lot of their money. So I think that is relevant too when they were trying to go all standard. But I think, they do release modern masters, and obviously modern is what helps sell those packs, so there's that. But
I mean, you want more people to play the game, and you don't want to get them started by, handing them Affinity and saying, here you go.
I agree, yeah. No, I think Limited is actually a good way for people to learn the game, too, but...
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, like, from an old-timer learner like me, it's hard to, like, reflect upon, like, new ways of, like, diving into the game now as much. And I can see, like, people popping into it, and it seems to be, like, of 2 groups that are kind of coming into Magic now. You have our younger generation, the new generation, and then you have people that are maybe, like, more closer to, like, our age that are now finally getting into Magic. And it does seem to taper how people go to it, I feel like, it seems like a lot of people that are getting into Magic now that are more our age like to look back at the older cards too, and might go to like something more like modern at least. While the actual younger generation that needs to learn it, I feel like pushes into standard a lot to begin with too. So, I mean, that's also an interesting argument is how many new players can we get of each of these groups, I guess there's technically more younger kids to get at this point in time into Magic, but
oh, for sure, yeah.
I do think like a standard format like the one before the bannings that had Aetherworks Marvel and had the copycat combo, I feel like people coming into that and going and playing at an F&M like they're just playing like a casual deck would not have a whole lot of fun either. So, I mean, standard should be a good way to introduce people to the game, but it can sometimes be just as delinquent as older formats, as we saw recently. So.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take them a lot to get into a position where things are broken, and they don't always seem to fix it in very decent ways. As we've seen some of the emergency banning, it's like questionable, like, okay, got you, all right.
Yeah, it feels like they should have just banned Marvel when they banned everything else, for example, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying not to, like, get rid of everybody's, mythic rares at the same time as they are, trying to make it accessible. Like, yeah, this was a huge mistake, and they've admitted that, but, like, you can bet it's not going to happen in the future.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, what you said makes me think that people who got into Standard and then bought these decks, these copycat decks and these Aetherworks Marvel decks, banning in itself could alienate them from the game, too, if the format hadn't done it, so...
Yeah, that's
catch-22.
That's, I think, one of the thoughts that I've seen in, like, the articles explaining why we banned X but not Y from Wizards of the Coast when the bannings happen.
It's it's definitely interesting, and we can only hope that they don't make a mistake like this in like any of the newer sets. This is definitely one of those things that we have to like look at for, you know, noticing their obvious flaws that they have. I mean, the thing is, there's always combos like this that show up. It's just, I guess it's just they don't want to focus the entire format on these specific combos. And I can understand that, you know, to open it up that there are more options to, you know, standard. But...
yeah.
And luckily they just hired a bunch of pro players who are now sort of like the internal, do a lot of internal testing now. And they're going to find things like the copycat combo before it comes out. Like Wizards R&D didn't catch, they admitted they didn't even notice the copycat combo in their future leagues. So they've made some big changes that I think will keep future things like this from happening. Although I saw a post on Reddit or somewhere that we've actually had bannings in standard like every 6 years or something like that. It's like a, because we had them in Mirrodin, we had them with Cobblade, and now we have them now. So it's kind of strange. So maybe every 6 years there's just going to be mistakes. I don't know.
That's not too bad. That's like, you know,
no, it's
every quarter of the lifespan so far. That's pretty good, I'd say.
It's just weird that there's always multiple cards when it happens. It's not just one card. It's just every time it's been a bunch of cards, like 4+ cards that they end up deciding to ban.
Also,
interesting.
Some mechanics are just kind of absurd and like
yes,
like Affinity, yeah,
like Affinity, like free spells from Urza Saga block.
Oh yeah,
right.
Like that sort of stuff. When it rains, it pours, because you make a set and you're like, oh, I'll put Affinity on X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z. When you give them Affinity or like Delve, it's all busted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It does. It's like you come up with a really cool idea, you put it on your cards, and then you're like, oh.
Oh, that could
That's
be
actually the
used
title
horribly.
of Mark Rosewater's biography.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess it's
horrible.
Mark Rosewater's biography.
Oops, I turned my sound back on Twitch accidentally. Anyway. So yeah, so that's been the interesting changes in coming up for the Grand Prix tournaments and stuff. So I guess it's going to be a thing that we're going to have to watch to see how this will evolve and how it will change, you know, as someone that does play more like vintage/legacy, I like seeing more of it, but I don't really go to tournament formats with my stuff, you know? So it's kind of like this weird catch-22. I like seeing it, but I'm probably not going to jump into those things because I build stuff and I don't have thousands of dollars to like make it like the most ridiculous things that people will have, you know? I build with what I get. So.
Right.
All right. Why don't we move on to the next topic I want to talk about? The draft format. Because, again, this is one of the major formats that technically exists in Magic out there. It's something that a lot of people play with, but we haven't really talked about it here and talked about, you know, a little bit of like what kind of things you want to do when you're playing it, stuff like that. So I don't know which one of you wants to start discussing draft format a little bit.
Well, I'm currently like 4 0-2 drop drafts into the format,
okay,
which is pretty exciting. And it's mostly because I think, and like reflecting on it yesterday during my stream and today, it's because I keep taking cards that were good in Amonkhet Draft Limited, and they did a really good job of shifting Hour so that Hour is completely different from Amonkhet, which is cool.
And that's a good thing.
It's cool,
Yeah.
But it's also super frustrating because, like, in the last limited formats, for example, in Kaladesh to Aether Revolt, the format changed just enough that it was difficult to just jump back into it, but it was still, like, there were still some familiarities with it. Whereas this one, like, you know, a 2/4 for 4 is probably one of the best creatures in your deck, because it produces 2 mana of any color.
Right, yeah, that thing's awesome.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah, I think the big difference that they did was the exert mechanic isn't as aggressive as it used to be, basically. There's only There's a common in the 3 exert colors, which are red, white, and green. There's one common in each that's like an aggressive exert common creature. But all the rest of the exerters in the set exert themselves for activated abilities, and that slowed down the format considerably because the stuff that made Triple Amonkhet so fast was all of these 2 and 3 drops with exert, like Hooded Brawler and Gustwalker and things like that were just like insane. They felt like they were a little bit too strong, and this is me sort of complaining because I like limited formats. The slower limited format is, the more I like it, basically. So
yeah,
I didn't love the last format because there was definitely like a fun police deck where you were like, oh sweet, I drafted like a blue-green ramp deck and playing Bounty of the Luxa and Lay Claim and Greater Sandworms, but I just got destroyed by someone on turn 4 because they had Cartouches of Zeal and creatures with exert, so I'm happy the format changed. But you're right, it does take time to see what the differences are, and I think that's the big difference. There's less aggressive exert. There's only one pack of the crazy overpowered exert creatures now, and that makes a lot of difference, I think.
And I think, for a second, I did want to interrupt something because I did felt like, just in case anybody watches this and doesn't know what draft is, I probably should quickly explain it. I just thought of it. Okay. Each person in a group gets 3 packs. You open a pack, you take a card, you pass it around first to clockwise, and then you open the second pack, do it counterclockwise, and the last pack clockwise again, and you keep taking one and passing it. And so you keep rotating the cards, and you build like a 40-plus card deck, minimum 40. And you can add basic lands to them. So you probably will have, like, provide basic lands just in case you need some extra ones, because, I mean, the ones in the pack are also open, but, they might not be.
It is a good format for beginners, I think, in some senses. In some senses, it might not be so good, but I think it's good because it doesn't require a buy-in like other formats. You just get to open packs and get cards. You get to keep all the cards you draft, obviously. And so those cards can help you build constructed decks. And it's a good way to learn the basics of Magic in a way you can't always do in a constructed format that has Aetherworks, Marvel, and Copycat. You're not going to be learning about how to race or things like that. You learn about all of that and when it's right to trade your creature for their creature, and how powerful 2-for-1s are.
I'm busy.
I think those are all good things about Limited. So I do recommend it as a way of, after you've sort of learned the basics of the game, introducing yourself to more competitive play.
I'd also like to add that if you're beginning Magic, there's a variant of Limited called Sealed, where you just get 6 packs and you build your decks from it. And if the idea of building a deck on the fly, like you're doing in Draft, is intimidating, Sealed is a great place to start because it gives you an idea of all the cards as a whole and what decks you can build with them, rather than having to figure out what you can build as you're going.
Right, yeah, Sealed is probably a little less, you're probably right, a little less overwhelming because you also don't have to, you just get the cards you get. You don't have to pick cards, and then from that pool you make a deck instead of figuring out what you should take, so.
I say I haven't experienced it that much, but I'd say the only downside is if you get someone who's there just to try to get the best cards, then it can ruin an experience for especially a newer player.
You mean someone who's just rare drafting everything?
Yeah, exactly.
We can see you waving.
Their deck isn't usually going to end up being that good if they do that, though.
No, but if they're there just to get their, just to get the best cards out of it.
He could.
Right.
Don't worry, he saw.
Yeah, and that's all they care about.
That can be frustrating, yeah.
And they just leave after the draft because they opened a foil Tarmogoyf or something.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I got what I wanted out of this.
Yeah, that does happen some, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that has. I have had mixed examples of draft. Can't play that. I've usually had a pretty good time, but it's like I recognize there are people like that, and it is a very interesting luck of the draw kind of thing.
Magic Online, luckily, doesn't really have that problem. Or if it does, you're not going to notice it really because you play in leagues. So you don't run into people who've rare drafted because most of the people on there are interested in actually drafting. So Magic Online's a good place to learn the format too.
Okay.
And the nice thing about Magic Online as opposed to real life drafting is in real life drafting you can't really look at your cards while you're drafting. So actually learning the ones you've already taken. So on Magic Online, you get to see all of them. So
yeah,
and that makes a big difference for a beginning drafter, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I completely agree with that. The only thing I wish with Magic Online is if there would be a way to exchange the cards you get there for real cards.
Yeah, well, there is a way. It's just very narrow and specific way. The redemption program or whatever you have to get.
Okay, that probably is. I haven't played on Magic Online in a few, about like 5 years.
Yeah.
They have changed since I've last been on there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you do it because I just play limited and sell all my cards after every draft, so I can draft more. But I think you have to get like a foil of every card in a set, or maybe a play set of foils, and then you get like they mail you like a real life.
You need to get one of each card in the set or one of each foil in the set.
There we go.
But like one of the issues is foil mythics are really expensive on Magic Online for this reason.
Even the bad ones, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it's since the window has closed. It used to be like 2 years or something that you were able to redeem your cards. Now it's like 6 months. So like redemption has become a lot less attractive to people. So
because unless you want to spend a crap ton of money just to be able to exchange them, it's not worth it.
Yeah, no. So like it used to be a huge issue though, where mythics were like $50 if they were foil, regardless of what they were, because of redemption.
Yeah, even in I was drafting and someone passed me a foil as foretold in the last format, and I was like, that's a foil mythic, and nobody's playing that anywhere or anything, but it was like 14 tickets or something just because it was a random foil mythic, but which was good for me, but for whoever's actually trying to redeem cards, it's not so good.
Right.
Because a foil as foretold in the real world can't be worth $14. I doubt it, right? So.
I mean, it certainly won't be unless it's like it gets made. It's a big thing.
Right, unless it's played somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Why don't we move on before I get interrupted again? Because I very well easily might be. All right.
Go.
Yeah, exactly. Joe, I might have to again rely on you here too.
Never.
Okay, so let's talk Space 1889, because apparently it's Victorian space travel. The original edition of it was the 80s.
That's so cool.
And now it's 2011 they came out with, I guess, the newest edition of it, which they've been putting out stuff for it. The latest one is all about being on Mars, actually.
The marvels of Mars.
I know, which is creatures and wonders of their past.
Now, is that a new release here?
Apparently, I guess Creatures of Mars and the Wonders of Martian Past might not be, but the Marvels of Mars is like a new compilation. This one was released in July 20th, 2017. So.
Oh, okay.
2 days ago.
Somebody needs to clean up their Wikipedia page then. Jeez.
I mean, yeah, no, the Wikipedia page I'm sure needs plenty of cleanup.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, this is definitely a very interesting setting, basically being Victorian era in space. I mean, I don't think I've heard of many other people doing that. The ether propeller, invented by Thomas Edison, allows you to travel into space.
Well, and there's also, there's another on Mercury, which talks about the rainforest on Mercury.
it's oh man, it's very Jules Verne, I guess, is what we could say. Yes,
it's very Jules Verne. It's also interesting. It's a D8 system.
Yeah. And
it's specialty D8s that have different cogwheels on them.
I like specialty and dice systems. Those are like my jam. Like Star Wars Force and Destiny. Is that what we're talking about when we're specialty dice, or is it just
when they have their own? They have instead of actually exactly. Instead of having.
Yeah, they actually did come out with new
dice. This one has blank spots and different amounts of cogwheels on them.
Yeah, they just did come out with it. Yeah, they came out with a dice set along with the Marvels of Mars at the same time. So.
That's awesome.
No, yeah, definitely. And they're seemingly putting out a bunch of stuff for this system. Is one of those things.
Is it like steampunk? Doesn't that mean it's steampunk if it's Victorian?
I guess it is a little.
I'd put it
in the steampunk realm.
Yeah, steampunk space travel. That's like the weirdest sounding thing, but it seems so interesting. They did come out with a quick starter recently, which I can quickly check over.
And it is by Clockwork Publishing.
Of course.
That's what I was gonna say.
Classic.
Do the spaces run? Do the spaceships is what I'm trying to say. Run on gears or what? Steam?
It's apparently like they just call it the what is it? The
Aether.
Aether propeller.
Mm.
Yeah.
Invented by Thomas Edison. Of course he did.
There's an adventure called the Aether Calculator.
Yeah, God. So it looks like you will take kind of skills, attributes, and talents to build your character. So, just by looking through the quick rules, it doesn't look like it's like a class-based system. It looks like it's just a build-your-character-based system more, which is cool.
Hey, is it point-based?
I don't know. I'm quickly looking through quick rules. You know how?
Okay, guys,
can I train my
I
whip
have
to
some.
speak English?
I have some notes on the mechanics of Aether.
Thank you.
It boils water and produces steam to power the propeller. So it is, in fact, just steampunk.
There you go. So Aether makes steam, huh?
Yeah, it's an energy source that harnesses the heat of the sun to boil water.
They're kind of comfy, but they don't fit me. Here, you can have them back. They're Grammys. You can have now Stream Niece is under the table with the cat.
Stream Niece cat.
Yeah. No, it does look like they do have like archetypes though, which they kind of define something. So I mean, the system definitely looks interesting, and D8 system is definitely one I actually haven't heard of up until now. I haven't encountered a D8 system, so
you could buy the Space 1889 soundtrack.
Wow, soundtrack.
I wonder if it's all period music.
I don't know.
It's got to be really silly though.
But the books they have out so far are London Bridge Has Fallen Down, Strange Land, Savage World Edition, Strange Land. They have the Game Master screen with an NPC booklet, Marvels of Mars, Venus Sourcebook, and the core rulebook.
So it looks like they did have Marvels of Mars out before. They just have the print version out now.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it says they revamped the core rulebook as well.
So they've been like they've put out a bunch of stuff. They've been working on getting them set up. It's very interesting system in general, just because not only the D8s, but the setting. Who hears about Victorian space travel? That's really interesting.
If you study books from the period, like literature, science fiction from that period, then definitely hear about Victorian space travel because that's all they knew.
There's a little bit in Doctor Who too.
Who does it with role-playing games? I guess if you had Doctor Who, you could probably do it then. You could pull it off.
Right.
But
I'm sure there has to be some Jules Verne role-playing games out there.
That's true, probably.
This is probably one of them. I can see where this is a pretty unique premise for... Even if it's definitely an aesthetic that we're all familiar with at this point in culture, putting it on an RPG is a really good way of expressing that. I think.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Otherwise, you end up with just movies, and then you get Wild Wild West, and we won't talk about it.
Well, there's the interesting thing with Wild Wild West, because the producer who did that was originally going to do the Superman movie. With what's his name? Nicolas Cage.
Oh goodness!
And
okay.
One of the stipulations for the Superman movie was he had to fight a giant spider.
Yep.
And since that wasn't made, he got his giant spider in Wild Wild West.
Did they have the spider already built? Because that's the only reason that you justify that.
I don't think they had it built, but
we have a physical spider in the back lot.
Well, no, I'm sorry. In the Superman movie, it was a Thanagarian snare beast. That's what they called it.
It was a giant spider.
They were going to do Thanagar in that movie, huh?
Yes. That's why they had they're like, what's going to be a Thanagarian snare beast? I think it's the only thing people could come up with, a giant space spider. Now, it was a giant clockwork spider. So.
And also, he wanted to insist that Superman was not allowed to fly.
Oh.
He wasn't allowed to wear a cape.
Should have just done Blue Superman
and
from the 90s.
He didn't want him wearing spandex either because he thought all of that was a little fruity.
Yeah, I've seen like the pictures of Nicolas Cage in the costume. He also had like things that he could pull off of his costume and throw at people. It was a little too Batman. Well,
considering the original Superman, he threw a weird plastic thing off his giant S that was like cellophane.
Right.
That's not too far-fetched if you base it off of that.
Is that was just kind of like a Superman?
No, I think he grew. I think his hair was longer.
He grew his hair long.
They wanted him to be sort of a scruffy Superman, I guess. I don't know. Well, I didn't realize they didn't want him to fly. That seems ridiculous. Superman not flying is crazy.
Oh gosh.
I managed to watch the documentary on it, Death of Superman Lives. It's so interesting. This is the kind of movie that you're like, I kind of want to see this, even though it would have been terrible.
Just like Wild Wild West was.
Yes, it would have been so bad that you would have had to watch it.
Wild Wild West is an experience that everyone has to experience once in their lives. After that, it can go away.
And Will Smith turned down The Matrix to be in that movie. So.
Oh, God. Yes. Just like Sean Connery turned down The Matrix and Lord of the Rings to be in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah.
That was a great
Speaking of, that movie's kind of steampunk, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes. We can only hope they bring that back in a better way, too, someday.
Yeah.
So my verdict, sight unseen, of actually playing the game is Space 1889. Definitely better than Wild Wild West.
I will agree.
Put it on the cover.
Yes. You could probably put money on that, yeah.
I would assume almost anything would be technically better than Wild Wild West.
I still want to see it on the cover now. Like, someone hears this and goes like, we're better than Wild Wild West.
That's not a selling point, I don't think. It's like, if you have to point that out... Anyway. If you have to point out that you're better than Wild Wild West, how good can you be?
I don't know. I mean, there are things worse than Wild Wild West. There are things worse.
There are.
Super Mario Brothers movie?
I don't know. That has its own charm of being terrible.
Yeah.
All
right. It did have John Leguizamo.
Yes, it did have John Leguizamo. Okay. While we move on to our next game, I do want to talk about a little bit. Coloris. Or, Colori. I'm going to really butcher this every time I try to pronounce it.
Coriolis.
Thank you, Coriolis.
Yeah, the Coriolis effect.
Okay, thank you. Someone pronounces it and then I can get it right. Coriolis, the Third Horizon.
And I have to say, Matt, congratulations. You didn't say Grand Prix the entire time.
I've gotten better. I can fix myself when I sometimes say things terribly. Anyway, so yes, it's set in like a Middle Eastern area known as the Third Horizon, like inspired. So it's got a very Arabian Nights feel. That's what it's supposed to have. Like 30 systems cut off from the other parts of inhabited space. It has attributes from 1 to 5, and it's a D6 system. So...
And also specialty dice.
And also specialty dice. Because specialty dice are our friends. Hey, look, you know, World of Darkness had specialty dice technically, but you had to get the ones with the little rose as the one, you know, because...
Does that mean you have to actually buy the dice from the company?
Yes.
Yes.
Do they make more money off of that somehow?
Yes.
Yeah, they probably do.
They still have to make the dice, and if you're kickstarting a game, materials are kind of yucky to buy.
Yeah. But Morpheus does a lot of great things, because we were talking about Morpheus last week, because we were talking about the Star Trek Adventures, because that just came out too.
And this is based off of one of their previous games, Mutant something.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. It's based off their Mutant Year Zero
Thank you.
system, I think. They're probably their system for it.
Yeah, they're using the system for it. So they already have some stuff, you know, some base stuff already done for it, which also makes it a little cheaper when you're trying to kickstart something. But they also have a lot of successful games. So to add, you know, specialty dice when you already have a successful company, when you're doing a new project, is a little easier than if it was a whole new company going, and we're going to spend the money to create all the dice casts and everything.
And mail them to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, it is also interesting because this is, like, we were talking, as we mentioned, we were talking about Star Trek, and there's another one where you're crewing a spaceship, but you're traveling across Horizon. So it feels like you're traveling across, like, the Arabian Nights sort of thing. Exploring ancient portabilities, missions for powerful factions, gaining political interest, you know. A different sort of space travel game, but it's definitely interesting that you can, like, definitely check out a lot of really cool places. Because, if I get to the news, because that will probably list all the books that they just came out. They came out with
I hear Arabian Nights are a lot like Arabian Days.
Thank you for that one. That was incredibly needed, and I commend you for the
that poor 9th century work of literature.
Yes,
that's what most people have heard of Arabian Nights because of Aladdin. So
yes, but I like the artwork. A lot of it's like on the darker side.
Yeah, that's true.
But like a lot of the machines and stuff they're showing in it look very like aged and.
Oh, here it is. Yes, there's supplements bundle, which they kind of put out with 4 new supplements, which is artifacts and technology, which I mean that's always cool to me. Apparently also and details of the mysterious Draconites race, so you can be aliens. And then 3 location supplements: Hammurabi, which is a space station, an oasis on a kind of a desert planet, and a ravine colony in a deep forest. Also surrounded by smoldering wasteland. So forest, smoldering wasteland, and then 1 colony in a ravine. So hey, you know what? But it does have like a very interesting feel, I think, to the entire thing, because it's like you have civilization, but it's very spread out, very sparse. We have space travel, but there isn't like I don't think like from reading
from what I've read, there were 3 portals originally. Mm-hmm. One that led from Earth to the other 2 star systems, and each star system had a portal to it. And the portals, because of portal wars, the portals from Earth and from the 2nd star system have been destroyed, leaving the people in the 3rd horizon stranded away from everyone else.
That's
cool premise, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think that's interesting, because then it's like, okay, they're building basically a whole society then away from the original societies they came from, but they're also already technologically advanced. So how does that change things? That you're building a society from not scratch, but it'd be interesting if they come back and say, okay, these portals were rebuilt now, and you can see the difference between how the societies have changed.
It also does feel very what am I looking for a description here? Very frontier.
It's making me think of Firefly a little bit.
Yes. There you go.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I like that parallel.
So it's like Arabian Nights meets Firefly in space, in a like area. That's actually probably Arabian Nights meets Firefly, and that's a really interesting way of describing a system. I like a good D6 system, I have to say. I think they've got their own version of it. So it sounds like, you have your skills and attributes, you get them together, you roll a D6. 6s in succession allow you to roll more 6s for bonus effects and things like that. So it feels a lot reminiscent of early Shadowrun with, 6s getting more 6s. Oh, hi. Thank you for being on my lap now. Okay.
Stream Cat Claws!
No.
Stream Niece.
Yes. Hi, Stream Niece. No typing on the computer. Okay. As long as you don't play with anything on the computer, you're okay to be here. But yes. No, I forget what I was going to say. But I also like the fact that you have your own spaceship. I always like a system where you have your own spaceship, I mean, you don't get a lot of those where you're designing your own one or, customizing your one based upon something. And this is another one.
Free spaceship.
I know. Well, I guess it might not actually be free, but...
I feel like there's some sort of resource that you have to spend for that.
No, free spaceship.
And they have an interesting set of, like, shipboard roles. Captain, engineer, pilot, sensor operator, gunner. They kept it very simple, but I guess then it's after that you figure out what kind of character you are when it comes to just being out there in space. You go more of like a smuggler, a bandit or something like that. So they do. I
have to say the materials they've shown are incredibly detailed and awesome. Their artwork is like beyond.
Yeah, it's
compare.
Well, I think Morpheus does very good artwork. From all the materials I've seen of theirs. That's one of those things that they are very easily able to express their game systems. Because I think on the show we've talked about a bunch of them. We as they put out material for them and we get an excuse to like mention them. And they're
really need to start trying some of these systems.
Yes, we do. Yes, we have to get like some one-shots or something where we're trying some various systems and stream them and stuff. I agree. I'm trying to schedule these things, so don't worry. It'll happen soon. We'll start doing some of them. But no. Yeah. I don't think I have anything else to say about this system. It's very interesting, and it definitely has a different take on the sci-fi space dwelling series. So...
Tony.
Yes, you have a nice picture there.
Tony.
You have a very nice drawing there that you had drawn earlier, and now you're showing off. That's headphones. Thank you for grabbing these headphones. Good work. Okay. Why don't we move on to our last main topic for today?
Quill, Shadow, and Ink.
Yes. So apparently
For you English majors out there.
So apparently the Quill series, from what I've seen, is definitely interesting. You're not going to hear anything, it's not plugged in. The Quill series appears to be a series of effectively...
Can you plug it in for me?
Probably not, it'll mess with everything. Unfortunately.
Plug it up.
I'll plug it into my phone. How's that sound? There you go. Actually, I could probably... Okay. What was I saying? Yeah, the Quill system is apparently a role-playing game for a single player. That's it. Single player. Which is definitely very interesting because I haven't really heard of single-player role-playing game systems.
Sounds like it might be good on an airplane, like an international flight.
Oh, yes.
If you're all alone.
So I actually went out and I bought the base Quill game because I really like single-player games.
Okay.
And I'm not familiar with single-player role-playing games as much, like versus board games. So
it was a
this
good
one
excuse.
you actually, yeah, it was a great excuse. In the base game, it's like it's quasi-medieval, I think is the way that they describe the setting. But you get a bunch of different scenarios, and based on like your roles and the writing that you do, each scenario turns out differently. So I think one of the important things about this game as a single-player game is that you either need to be able to come up with new scenarios yourself, or like because each of the scenarios has consequences, like depending on how well you wrote according to the person that you're sending it to. So it seems really sweet. I'm not sure about the replay value, but they do give a bunch of different like character archetypes in the base game, so that you can play as like a poet or an aristocrat, and each of those have different like skill levels.
Yeah.
But the Quill and Ink.
Streaming. Keep those streams a streaming.
Okay. Sorry for delay, folks. Hopefully that won't happen again. Aurora, why don't you not be back there, okay? Why don't you be over on this side of the table? Be on this side over here, just in case. I don't want anything happening to any of the wires and things turning off again. I don't want you to get in danger, too. You might get hurt. We're talking about Quill and Shadow. Ink and Shadow.
Yeah.
Yes. I no longer have things in front of me. But I know that we were talking about, in particular, we talked about Quill a little bit. We were talking about Ink and Shadow. So,
you're writing letters.
You're writing letters, and it feels more Lovecraftian, I think is the way, what I was going to comment on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know where we left off before everything died.
Morgan was starting to say something, and then it cut out.
Yep.
Okay. I think that the expansion shows a lot of promise because it, like, builds on the premise by providing... It looked like it provided an actual narrative and a purpose to the roleplay because, like, when you're doing a single-player... When I'm doing a single-player game, I want to have a purpose. Like, if I'm playing Castles of Mad King Ludwig, which is a game where you accrue... Like, you score points at the end of the game. I'm trying to beat my last score. But if I'm playing a role-playing game, I want to have, like, some conclusion in mind. And this one, like, based on the points that you score throughout the game, has some sort of conclusion, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
Also, it's super cheap, you guys. It's like, I bought the base game on a whim, and I'm probably going to go and get the other one, too, just because...
Oh, the Quill...
It's like
the watermark
recommended
PDF for Quill is $1,
Yeah.
Wow.
And same for the expansion.
Technically, it's pay what you want, but $1 is the recommended price. Is all they're asking for. So I mean, it's I do like supporting people that do this and actually like giving them at least what they ask for, if not a little more, because they're willing to put out these interesting things.
Support creators, kids.
Yes, support those that are creating your local things. Man, I'm probably going to have to get the video of the first part off of Twitch. It's never a day without technical difficulties. That's what I'm going to say.
Technical difficulties? What's those?
All right. Why don't we move into our final two segments just to finish up the show? I don't want to hurry us along too much, but I worry about things shutting down again randomly. So... let's start with stories from the table. It's one of our two normal things where we take stories from either ourselves or guests. Usually we like to focus on new guests. This could be from a role-playing game if you do a lot of those. It could be from a deck of Magic or a game of Magic, or it could even be from a very awesome game of board game that you actually had that you had a really fun time with. It's just one of those like stories from your gaming table that sometimes you like to share with people.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about this last weekend when my friends had a birthday, so we did a board game, like, evening at our friend's house, and so one of the things that I get kind of frustrated about it with board games like Cards Against Humanity is if I don't know the person, I don't know how to cater to them when they're judging whatever the cards are. Mm-hmm. So we played this game called Red Flags, which is like a kind of dating version of Cards Against Humanity, where you present two good qualities and one of your opponents tries to sabotage it by putting a red flag with it too, and then the judge will pick which person, like, in aggregate with the two good and one bad quality that they want to, like, date. And I was like, so I ended up going for just synergy. So one time my two cards were makes time for you always and owns a time traveling DeLorean. Which I thought was a pretty good combination, but I ended up learning a lot about the people that I was playing with, which is like an aspect of that kind of game that I hadn't thought of before. So you get the cool synergy cards, but then you also get to know that, like, David Tennant is my friend's favorite doctor and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. I like that experience a lot.
Oh no, that's always a wonderful experience where you can, like, just through a game you could learn a little bit more about people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I won't forget it either because it was in the context of the game. Like, if she had just told me straight up that David Tennant was her favorite doctor, I would have forgotten it in an instant. Not because I wasn't paying attention, but that's just because how my mind works.
Oh no, I've been like that too, where you're just like, okay, that's a great fact. I don't know if I remember that at all.
Yeah.
Cool. Nizzahon?
Yeah. Yeah, the story that keeps coming to my mind is kind of a bad beat story, actually, but it's a funny one. So, I was drafting, and somehow the people in my pod, two different people in my pod managed, we talked about the combo earlier, managed to draft the copycat combo in limited. And I played against both of them, and they both managed to get the combo online in 4 games against me. Like,
That's
one
so
of them on
good.
turn 4. So, basically, that was terrible, but it's the most recent story I can think of that's really like, what are the chances of that actually happening? They have to be incredibly low. So that's my story.
And with 2 different people also.
Yeah. Well, and the chances, I've seen people post like breakdowns of like chances a certain mythic gets opened in a draft, then they're incredibly low, and so 2 Saheeli Rise is nuts. So granted, the other piece is uncommon, so it's that part's not that hard to get, but
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's still the odds are very not for that.
No. They had fun though.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I think Matt is being distracted yet again.
Happens. Oh yeah.
Stream niece, both a blessing and a curse.
I can see that it's gone on the
Yeah, I saw him walk into the other room.
Okay.
So, anyway, I know he'd want to go to Gaming Sage Advice. So, does anyone have a good question that we could use for Gaming Sage Advice?
Okay. All right. Secure once again. Not wandering away. It's upstairs. Okay.
I started moving us to Gaming Sage Advice.
Okay, did you have a good advice?
Nah, I was asking if anyone had a question.
Oh, okay.
I have a question for you guys.
Okay, cool.
So at this board game party, we made tacos in the middle of it, and they were delicious. I would like some recommendations for board games you can play while you're eating.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'd say any dice games would be okay.
Okay.
Because dice are easy to clean off if anything gets on them.
I guess it's also going to depend on the type of food you're eating, too. Like, if you're eating something really messy, I definitely wouldn't... Yeah, I wouldn't recommend...
Tacos, and we're all, like, reasonably good eaters.
Then you might be able to get away with something a little more complex, like a card game or something, too. I probably would avoid, like, a large board, just because that would... If something spills, you're getting over a lot of stuff, more likely. If you just have something like a taco and there's a little spill, like a couple cards, usually that's not something that... It's usually something that could be cleaned up pretty easily. It's less damaging, so... Card game, dice game would be good.
Especially a card game like Gloom, where they're plastic cards.
Oh my god, Gloom is wonderful for that kind of thing, yeah.
I've actually seen Gloom cards that have been used so much that the images are wearing off, and it's the saddest thing.
It's already a depressing game!
Yeah.
But it's appropriate for the game.
It means someone had a lot of fun with it, though, right?
Yeah.
No, it was a demo game at Fantasy Flight in Roseville. It was like people just used it so much. But yeah, and I was thinking too, like, we played Concept, which was actually pretty good because most of the people didn't have to do anything with their hands. Mm-hmm. So I thought, like, having a game where it's pretty hands-off just in general, where all you have to do is maybe move a piece around once in a while. That way you can, like, hold a taco in one hand and, like, move a meeple in the other.
The other thing I could think of, which would be a pretty good party game, you could do one of the single-session light role-playing games.
Okay, yeah.
Like, Fiasco is pretty good, and Dread would be good.
I don't know about Dread.
I think you could pull it off with food. I mean, you don't take you can't be eating when you're messing with the Jenga tower is the only thing,
What about like Ultimate Werewolf?
Ultimate Werewolf would be fun. The one person would probably have to either not be eating a lot or be done eating, because you have to have the moderator.
True.
So the moderator announces everything with their mouth full.
Yeah.
Or
like a game like Resistance or Secret Hitler, where you have 2 teams basically working against each other and you don't know who's who. That might be decent while eating. Because that's just, you know, in between chewing, you talk a little bit, basically.
Right. Those are all hands-off games.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are some good options while eating, but again, also, I'll go with Joe. It also depends on who you're eating with and what you're eating, too. I mean...
That could be a question, too. What's best to eat while you're gaming? The flip side of that question.
Yes.
Not nachos.
I mean, I'm fine with something like...
Pizza?
Pizza. I've eaten Chinese food while gaming, but that's just me.
Chopsticks or fork?
Chinese food all the time.
I went for fork just because it's a little more control, and I'm not an expert
Yeah.
at chopsticks. Chopsticks if I was in the restaurant.
Right.
Now, what about plain chopsticks?
I can't remember how to do it exactly because I'm not the most musical. I vaguely do.
We'll have your dad play 'em.
Okay. Let's see here. I mean, general snacks. As long as it's not something that has a lot of like Cheetos.
Not nachos or
No,
Cheetos.
No,
Yeah.
like potato chips, you're probably not going to get a lot of stuff on your fingers. Pretzels, usually good. Like crackers, probably.
Something not with sauce.
You could do like a dessert or something too, as long as you have like a little plate, like a cupcake.
Something you use like a utensil for, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a pudding?
Something that keeps your hands clean.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as you got the plates and bowls for it, and yes, those work too.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of options of stuff to eat with it. It's whatever you like. You have to measure your level of messiness to the level of how much the food is kind of messy, you know.
Or with pizza, you could do the lazy man and cut up the box top
Oh
to
god.
use as plates.
Yes.
We've done that before.
We have done that before. I think we try to avoid gaming while eating greasy pizza, though. One of those
Yes.
things.
Yeah, that seems like a fair thing to do.
Oh yeah.
Avoid.
Grease. The only thing grease doesn't ruin is those dice.
Yeah. Why is my character sheet see-through now?
That's been a role-playing game with me. You get a portion of it like, oops, I dropped grease on this. When did this happen?
10 years ago.
Oh, no, I can see through it. It's the test from The Simpsons, wiping the fish sandwich on the wall so that you can see through it.
Yes. It's like, ooh, I have a see-through character sheet.
Anyway, okay, cool. I think that's a great question to talk about. I mean, that's something that a lot of us like to do while we're gaming. Eat. One of the things to get along with. I'm just about done. High five. All right, why don't we finish up for today then? A little early, but I worry about the computer shutting down, and I'm getting tormented by stream needs. High five again. Okay. I think I have to wash my hand now.
Don't have
know-
stream these
you
while
don't
you're
know where
playing
she's
board
at.
games.
No, stream these when we're playing board games. It'll probably be in bed. Nah.
I have to wash your hand.
I'm just joking with you. I'm joshing with you. Another high five. All right, why don't we have our guests promote themselves? Nizzahon, why don't we start with you, since we had Morgan start with the stories from the table. We'll sort of do a reverse here.
Okay. Well, I'm Nizzahon. I have a Magic YouTube channel. I do mostly limited content. I post 2 draft videos a week and a crack-a-pack every week where I talk about what I would first pick. And I also do a little bit of Magic history. I do weekly top 10 lists where I go back into the archives of Magic, basically, and find out what cards of the one that's out right now is top 10 cards with reach, basically. So I went through Gatherer, looked up every card to see how well they did at Pro Tours and Grand Prix, and came up with the list. So that's pretty much all that I do. But yeah.
That sounds like fun stuff. I like the top 10
Yep.
reach thing. I like a good
Yeah,
reach
that's
creature.
pretty cool.
Morgan, how about you?
Okay. I am a Magic streamer and writer. I write for Quiet Speculation. You can find my stuff on their Insider side. And I do the Quiet Speculation podcast every Thursday. We do a live podcast for insiders, and then that goes up shortly afterwards for the general public. And I stream. I stream on Thursdays as well.
Cool.
And you can follow me on Twitter to figure out when I stream.
Joe?
Well, we will be off tomorrow for Treasure of the Lost Legion. We have other stuff that we are doing. We're going to go visit a friend in New Jersey who's coming up from Texas. So we will not be on tomorrow, but I will see everyone again for next Saturday for more of this.
Mm-hmm. I may have multiplayer, like just gaming stream Sunday night, and I will probably be posting somewhere a new updated Twitch schedule. I'm going to try to schedule things ahead of time for whatever I'm planning for the week. Hopefully to add more of other content into Twitch streaming, other than this show, Treasure of the Lost Legion, and random video games, which I've been doing. I would like to add more content, so we'll see about doing that. Oh, Vampire the Eternal Struggle stuff, expect it soon for the deck building and game. My schedule has been terrible for getting it together. That stuff will come out soon and then go up on the channel. So if you've been missing, if anybody out there's really been missing it, which I guess a couple people probably have, it will show up again, at least to finish up that series, where I can then start the next collectible card game in history.
And maybe that's something we could stream, since I found that one card game thing that we could possibly do. Ooh.
Yes. Alright, so I guess that's it for today. Thank you again to my guests. I hope everybody had a great time. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And we'll be back next week for another exciting episode of Discussing Tabletop. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.